Hello, Mr. Reed. I need you to pull over right now and open the trunk. The short text message from my assistant suddenly flashed on my phone screen. It was a rainy night, and I was driving to my sister-in-law's wedding. Mr. Reed, I need you to pull over right now and open the trunk. When I got out of the car and opened the trunk, I could barely breathe. All this time, my husband. Before the story begins, if you're watching this, please leave a comment telling us where you're from. And don't forget to like and subscribe. It helps this channel grow, so we can bring you more incredible stories. Tonight, the sound of car horns blared chaotically through the city streets. A light drizzle had begun to fall, and despite the rhythmic sweep of the windshield wipers, the glass was becoming a blur. I gripped the steering wheel tightly. My mind was a whirlwind of thoughts, but I tried to focus on the road. Tonight was Jessica Reed's wedding. The reception was being held at the Plaza Hotel, one of the most exclusive five-star venues in New York City. It was a place my husband's family could never have dreamed of affording if I hadn't secretly pulled some strings. Of course, they had no idea. In their eyes, I was just a parasitic wife, a leech, living off my successful husband, Ethan Reed. The phone mounted on the dashboard rang shrilly. The name Sharon Reed flashed on the screen. My mother-in-law. I took a deep breath, steeling myself, and pressed the call button. Before I could even get a word out, her sharp, grating voice pierced my ear. "Where the hell are you? You have some nerve showing up this late. It's the most important day of my Jessica's life, and you're deliberately coming late to embarrass us, aren't you, Sharon?" shrieked into the phone. Her voice was so loud I had to hold the phone away from my face. "I'm sorry, Sharon. The traffic is terrible because of the rain. I'm almost there. I should arrive in about 10 minutes, I answered as gently as I could, swallowing the lump of frustration in my chest. "Excuses. You've always been lazy trash. You should be grateful every day that my Ethan married a poor girl like you. You brought nothing into this marriage, you don't know how to dress, and now you're late for a family event. You better not embarrass my family in front of Ethan's VIP guests with that cheap look of yours. You should be ashamed of yourself." Click. She hung up on me. I let out a long sigh. For the past 5 years, these hurtful words had been my daily reality. Sharon was always looking for an opportunity to belittle me. In her eyes, her son was the greatest man in the world, a self-made CEO who had built his company from scratch. Less than 5 minutes later, my phone rang again. This time, the name Ethan Reed appeared. I swallowed hard. "Hello, honey," I said quietly. "Are you trying to embarrass me in front of my business partners on purpose?" Ethan's voice was cold, filled with suppressed rage. "My mother just called complaining, 'You're not here yet. You know my most important clients are here tonight, don't you? If you're going to show up with that pathetic face and those cheap clothes, just turn the car around and go home. I don't want to ruin my reputation because of a wife who doesn't know her place. Ethan, the traffic is really bad. I'm wearing the dress you picked out for me yesterday." I tried to explain, even though I knew it was useless. "Don't make excuses. Just show up, smile quietly, and don't say anything stupid in front of my friends. And remember, you live off my money. Everything you wear, everything you eat, it's all paid for with my blood, sweat, and tears. So for one night, just try not to be a nuisance." "Got it, yes, Ethan. I understand." He hung up without another word. I let the tears fall, one by one down my cheeks. It was so absurd, so ironic. Ethan was always so proud of his money, his title as CEO. But he only had that position because I had put him there. The massive corporation he was so proud of, the one he claimed to have built from the ground up, was actually my late father's company. I was the majority shareholder, the true owner. I had hidden all of this from him and his family simply because I wanted him to feel respected as the head of the household. I swallowed my pride and endured daily humiliation just to protect his male ego. Just then, a notification broke through my thoughts. It was a text from my personal assistant, Maria Flores, who had been my bridge to the company all this time. She was the only one who knew my true identity and had faithfully helped me oversee the company from behind the scenes. The text was very short, but every letter was capitalized. M.R. Reed, I need you to pull over right now and open the trunk. The moment I read it, my heart began to pound wildly. I felt like I couldn't breathe. What was going on? Why would Maria tell me to open my trunk in the middle of the road? A dreadful premonition washed over me, a feeling that something was terribly wrong. Without a second thought, I flicked on my left turn signal and pulled the car over to a relatively quiet shoulder under the dim glow of a streetlight. The rain had subsided to a fine mist. I turned off the ignition and unbuckled my seatbelt with suddenly cold, trembling hands. I stepped out of the car. The damp night air hit my face. The noise of cars speeding down the highway hummed in my ears. I walked slowly to the back of the car. My hand reached for the trunk release button. Click. The trunk door lifted slowly. My eyes widened. I gasped, struggling for air at the sight of what was inside. It wasn't a spare tire or empty boxes. It was a large, black, high-end leather suitcase that I knew all too well. It was my husband's. The one he used every time he went on an overseas business trip. With a trembling hand, I unzipped the suitcase. It wasn't locked, as if its owner had packed in a great hurry. The moment the suitcase opened, my world shattered. My knees went weak. If I hadn't grabbed the edge of the trunk for support, I would have collapsed onto the asphalt. On the very top lay a collection of red velvet jewelry boxes. I opened one. My late mother's blue diamond ring, a family heirloom, glittered dazzlingly under the streetlight. In the second box was her emerald necklace. In the third, her white gold bracelet set. Tears streamed down my face uncontrollably. These were the heirlooms my husband had told me were stolen during a break-in a year ago. I had cried for days, and he had comforted me with a look of pity, promising he would do everything to catch the thief. It turned out the thief was my own husband. But the horrific shock didn't end there. My trembling hands pushed the jewelry boxes aside, revealing a clear plastic folder filled with documents. I pulled out the folder and read it under the dim light. The first document was a sales contract for a luxury penthouse apartment in downtown Manhattan. My eyes were fixed on the buyer's name. It wasn't my name, nor was it Ethan's. The name Chloe Cole was written clearly. His assistant. The young woman my mother-in-law always praised for being polite and efficient. The second set of documents was a power of attorney and several property deeds. These were my personal assets, properties I owned and kept hidden in a safe at home. My signature on the documents had been expertly forged. My husband had been secretly transferring my assets to his name, planning to liquidate them and move the money to an offshore account. And then at the bottom of the folder was the thing that sent me into absolute despair. 2 one-way business class airline tickets. Passenger names Ethan Reed and Chloe Cole. Destination, Zurich, Switzerland. Departure date tonight at 11 p.m. I glanced at my watch. It was 8 p.m. Jessica's wedding had just started and was scheduled to end at 10. My husband was planning to steal my mother's heirlooms and all my assets, then flee to Switzerland with his mistress right after his beloved sister's party. The ringing in my ears grew louder. My chest felt tight, as if a giant boulder was crushing me. For 5 years, I had devoted myself to him. I gave up my career. I hid my wealth so he wouldn't feel inferior. I patiently served his cruel mother. I turned a blind eye when his sister constantly borrowed money from me, never to pay it back. I gave everything, my fortune, my heart, even my self-respect. And this was my reward, a meticulously and cruelly planned betrayal. He had not only betrayed me, but had also stolen my mother's most precious heirlooms and was about to leave me with nothing, a destitute woman, as if I were a piece of trash to be thrown away. I slammed the suitcase shut. I clenched my fists so tightly that my nails dug into my palms. The sharp pain was nothing compared to the agony in my shattered heart. The tears stopped. The tears of sorrow evaporated in an instant, replaced by a white-hot rage that consumed my entire being. I was no longer the weak wife. I was no longer the foolish woman who could be trampled on. Tonight, at his sister's lavish wedding reception, I would make every single one of them pay dearly for every tear I had shed. Tonight, there would be no escape to Switzerland. There would only be ruin. I picked up my phone and called my assistant. Maria. My voice was hoarse, but it was as cold and sharp as ice. Get everything ready. We're starting the war tonight. I slid back into the cold driver's seat. The engine was still off. The rain outside had stopped completely, and puddles on the road reflected the yellow glow of the streetlights. The black suitcase, filled with the evidence of my husband's betrayal, now sat in the passenger seat next to me, a silent testament to my 5 years of foolishness. My eyes stared straight ahead, but my mind drifted back to the past, to the time when this whole web of lies began. 5 years ago, I met Ethan at a charity gala hosted by our company. I was young then, having just inherited a massive fortune and a corporate empire after my father's sudden death from a heart attack. In the midst of my deep grief, confusion, and loneliness, Ethan appeared. He was a mid-level manager in one of our departments. He was handsome, spoke politely, and seemed incredibly understanding. He approached me slowly, gently. He was always there when I was crying in my office, brought me warm food when I forgot to eat while reviewing reports, and listened to my complaints about the pressure of leading a giant corporation at such a young age. I was starved for love and needed someone to lean on. I fell for him fast. When we started thinking about a serious relationship and planning our marriage, Ethan showed me his vulnerable side. One night at a restaurant, he held my hand tightly and looked into my eyes with a sad, sincere expression. "Evelyn, I love you so much," he said, his voice trembling. "But I'm scared. My family is just normal. My mother worked her whole life as a school teacher to raise me and my sister alone. If my family finds out I'm marrying the sole heiress to a massive corporation, my mother will feel intimidated and insecure. My relatives will drift away. And as a man, I won't be able to hold my head up. I don't want people to think I married you for your money." His words to my love-struck ears sounded so genuine. I thought he was a wonderful man who cherished his honor and cared about his family's feelings. "What should we do, Ethan?" I asked, a naive and foolish question from a woman ready to do anything to be with him. "Could we? Keep your identity a secret. I'll be the face of the company. I'll work hard proving my abilities from the ground up. You can be the wife who takes care of me comfortably at home. Let everyone, including my mother and sister, think that I'm the one providing for you. This is purely to protect my pride as a husband, as the man of the house. Please." Blinded by love, I agreed to his proposal. I called Maria, my late father's loyal assistant, and had her handle all the legal paperwork secretly. I appointed Ethan as the face of the company, the CEO. I, as the absolute majority shareholder, would control everything from behind the scenes. I withdrew from high society, swapped my designer dresses for plain clothes, and let the world believe that Ethan Reed had built everything from scratch climbing to the pinnacle of success on his own. We got married. At first, everything was like a dream. When we were alone at home, Ethan treated me like a queen. But the fantasy turned into a nightmare when his mother Sharon and his sister Jessica decided to move in with us, complaining that their own house was too quiet. The house they moved into was one I had bought with my own money before the marriage, a fact I kept hidden by stashing the deed away. In their eyes, it was the house Ethan had bought with his own blood, sweat, and tears. The moment my mother-in-law stepped into that house, my hell began. Sharon was a woman consumed by a hunger for status and material possessions. Because Ethan had fed her the lie that he was the millionaire responsible for their lavish lifestyle, Sharon believed she was the all-powerful matriarch. She treated me worse than a servant. One morning, in the second year of our marriage, I woke up with a slight fever. I was dizzy and shivering. I asked the housekeeper to make me some warm porridge. Suddenly, my mother-in-law stormed into the kitchen, threw a pot into the sink, and berated the housekeeper with a sharp voice. "Who told you to cook for this lazy bitch?" Sharon yelled. Then she turned to me, her eyes filled with contempt and disgust. "You're just a freeloader here. My son works himself to the bone at the company, leaving early in the morning and coming home late at night, his head splitting from business worries while you just sleep and expect to be served. Get up, hand wash all of Ethan's shirts. And don't use the washing machine. You'll ruin his expensive clothes, you useless wife." I remember crying that day as I washed my husband's shirts with trembling, feverish hands. That night when Ethan came home from work, I told him about it in our bedroom, hoping he would take my side, maybe even explain a little of the truth to his mother. But what was my loving husband's response? "Aren't you being a little too sensitive? She's an older woman. She's allowed to nag a little. Besides, you don't do anything at home anyway. It's only natural she asks you to do some chores. At least that makes you useful. Please just show my mom some respect. Don't come to me with these petty complaints when I get home from work. I'm tired enough trying to feed all of you." That was the moment I started to realize something was deeply wrong with my decision. The gaslighting was endless. If I bought something with my own allowance, which was actually a portion of my company's dividends funneled through another account, Ethan would lecture me at the dinner table about being a wasteful woman who didn't understand the value of hard-earned money. Jessica, my sister-in-law, was no less cruel. She would often sneak into my room and take my things without asking: handbags, shoes, small pieces of jewelry. She even borrowed hundreds of thousands of dollars from me for a business venture money she never paid back. If I dared to say anything to her, she would immediately run to her mother crying crocodile tears. Then Sharon would humiliate me in the living room. "How dare you be so stingy when my daughter borrows some of your cheap things? Remember, everything in this house was bought with my son Ethan's money. So Jessica has a right to everything here. Far more than an outsider like you." For years, I swallowed all their insults. I let myself be ignored, trampled on, and treated like a parasite. Whenever I reached my breaking point and wanted to expose everything, Ethan would suddenly change his tune and become incredibly sweet. He'd buy me flowers, take me out for a private dinner, and remind me of my promise to protect his male ego. He was a master at manipulating my emotions, turning the situation around to make me feel guilty for my own thoughts. And as for Chloe Cole, she joined the company 3 years ago. At first, she was just an ordinary administrative assistant, but Ethan quickly and unilaterally promoted her to be his personal assistant. I often found suspicious affectionate messages on my husband's phone, and Maria would report questionable transactions for luxury goods that were outside our normal expense reports. But whenever I asked for an explanation, Ethan would fly into a rage, treating me like I was insane. That's business. What do you know about the corporate world? You didn't even finish college. Instead of watching TV all day, maybe you should read a book. Then your brain might actually work, and you wouldn't be so paranoid about your husband who's working himself to death. He had screamed at me one night, his eyes bulging when I asked about a charge for a designer handbag on his credit card. I took a long, slow breath, bringing myself back to the present. I leaned my head back deeply against the car seat. The pain from these past memories no longer made my chest tight or made me want to cry. Those wounds had already scarred over, transformed into a dark, cold, and sharp hatred. I had been asleep for too long, lost in a fantasy of love spun by a man with a devil's heart. I had let a parasite feel like a king, and I had allowed his family to spit on me and suck my blood daily. Tonight, while they were at the peak of their happiness, flaunting their fake wealth at that glamorous wedding, I would snatch it all from their grasp. I would strip their lies bare in front of everyone they worshipped. I gripped the gear stick firmly. I started the engine. The low growl of my luxury sedan's engine seemed to play in tune with my now steadfast and unwavering resolve. I glanced one last time at the suitcase beside me, making sure my weapon of mass destruction was secure. I pressed the accelerator, cutting through the rest of the night, heading towards the hotel where the party was being held. Jessica's wedding funded by the embezzlement of my company's money. The night that was supposed to be my husband's triumphant farewell before he abandoned me. We'll see, Ethan. We'll see who's laughing at the end of this party. I have a feeling you're not going to like the wedding gift I'm bringing tonight. My car cut through the city streets, the rain now just a fine mist. The streetlights reflected off the wet asphalt, creating long shadows that seemed to dance with the speed of my car. The black suitcase in the passenger seat felt like a phantom passenger carrying the death knell of my marriage. While staring straight ahead, my thoughts were forcibly dragged back to an incident a few weeks ago, the pivotal moment when all of my husband's masks began to peel away. It was a gloomy Tuesday afternoon. The clouds had been heavy since morning, as if foreshadowing the storm that was about to break over my life. I was sitting in the study at home, sipping warm tea and reading a novel, trying to ignore the sound of my mother-in-law grumbling in the living room about the poor TV reception. Suddenly, my phone vibrated. It was a call from Maria. My personal assistant, who had been managing my company from behind the scenes, never called during work hours unless it was an absolute emergency. I answered the call and walked out to the bedroom balcony so no one in the house could overhear. On the other end of the line, Maria's voice was tense, cold, and filled with caution. She told me to leave the house immediately, using the excuse of going to the salon and to meet her at a quiet cafe far from the city center. It was a secret spot we often used when I needed to sign documents without my husband's knowledge. I had a bad feeling from the start. My heart pounded the entire taxi ride there. When I arrived, I found Maria sitting in a corner of a soundproofed VIP room. On the table in front of her was a thick red file folder and a tablet that was turned on. Maria's face was pale, and her eyes as she looked at me were filled with deep concern. I sat down across from her and asked immediately, "What's wrong?" Maria didn't answer right away. She swallowed hard and slowly pushed the red file towards me. With a slightly trembling hand, she told me to open it. I opened the file. Each page contained our company's third-quarter financial report. Although I had given Ethan the CEO title, I always had Maria conduct a secret audit every 3 months to ensure my late father's company was running well. At first, I didn't see anything unusual. To the untrained eye, the numbers looked normal. But then Maria started pointing to several expense items highlighted in yellow: a raw material procurement project, digital marketing expenses, and new branch expansion costs. The amounts were astronomical, reaching tens of millions of dollars in a very short period. I frowned. I remembered Ethan proudly telling me last month that he had won a major bid and needed initial capital. But the numbers in the report were far beyond what was reasonable. Maria then opened a second file. Inside were the investigation documents from a private investigation team she had secretly hired after sensing something was off with the financial reports. The documents showed that the raw material suppliers and marketing agencies that had received tens of millions of dollars were actually shell corporations, empty companies created solely for the purpose of siphoning money. And what made my breath catch in my throat was the fact that the registered owner of these shell companies was a foreign man who was the personal driver of my husband's assistant, Chloe Cole. I was still in denial. I looked at Maria with tears welling in my eyes and said that maybe Ethan had been scammed by his business partners. Maybe Chloe had done something behind his back. It couldn't be true. The Ethan, who was always so gentle with me, who cared so much about his pride, couldn't possibly embezzle company funds so brazenly. But Maria shattered my last sliver of hope. She picked up the tablet, opened a locked folder, and played a video. The video was high resolution, filmed with a hidden camera in a dark, smoke-filled room. In the center of the room was a large round table, where several men were playing cards with stacks of chips worth hundreds of thousands of dollars in front of them. And there he was. My husband, Ethan Reed, sat at the head of the table. He had his arm wrapped around the waist of a scantily clad woman, not me and not Chloe Cole, and was laughing loudly. His eyes were bloodshot, and his face was contorted with a greed I had never seen before, like a wild beast. In a trembling voice, Maria explained that this was a high-end, illegal casino run by the mob. My husband was a severe gambling addict, an addiction he had perfectly hidden behind expensive suits and a dignified smile when he left for work. When he came home late at night, he wasn't working overtime. He was gambling away my family's legacy. But the nightmare hadn't reached its peak yet. Maria handed me one last piece of paper. It was a copy of a promissory note. Ethan had not only squandered the embezzled money from the shell companies, but had also lost big, and was now in debt to a powerful loan shark who financed the casino. The amount of debt was unimaginable, millions of dollars with crippling interest accruing daily. The repayment deadline was the end of this month. If he couldn't pay, my husband's life and our company's reputation would be the collateral. I froze. My body turned ice cold. My mind went blank. No wonder my husband had been so irritable at home lately. No wonder he often yelled at me for no reason. He was cornered a rat caught in a trap of his own making. Then my eyes caught a receipt in the pile of documents. A receipt for the rental of a 5-star hotel ballroom, a reservation for a famous designer's wedding dress, high-end catering for 200 guests, and a deposit for imported decorations. The reservation was made by my husband. The purpose, Jessica Reed's wedding. The total cost was in the millions, and it was all paid from the account of the shell company created with money stolen from my company. That day, in that cafe, my tears finally broke through. I cried hysterically. My mother-in-law always praised her son. Jessica always bragged about how incredibly rich and generous her brother was. They humiliated me every day, thinking I hadn't contributed a single dime to that lavish wedding. But they had no idea that the very dress Jessica would wear, every plate of food that would be served at the party, was all paid for with my father's legacy stolen by their pride and joy. And right there, the deadliest weapon fell into my hands, the weakness my husband had tried so desperately to hide. He wasn't a successful businessman. He wasn't a great CEO. He was just a loser, a thief, a gambling addict being choked by a ruthless loan shark. He was throwing a lavish wedding for his sister not because he cared about her, but because he wanted to maintain the illusion of his success in front of his family and business partners to cover up the fact that he was actually completely broke and on the verge of bankruptcy. That discovery changed everything. My love for my husband died in that moment, buried along with the disgusting truths Maria had laid out on the table. I instructed Maria to continue gathering evidence, to copy every bank transfer record, to save every recording, and to secretly prepare the legal documents. I didn't confront my husband when I returned home after that meeting. I went home, put on my apron, and prepared dinner as if I were the same clueless, foolish wife. I waited for the right moment. And tonight, when I opened the trunk of my car and found my mother's heirlooms and his plane tickets to flee with Chloe, I knew the moment I had been waiting for had finally come. He was planning to run from his loan shark debts and leave me behind as the scapegoat to bear the full brunt of the company's ruin. If he thought I would let him go that easily, he was gravely mistaken. The cold air from the car's air conditioning brushed against my face, bringing my consciousness fully back to the present. I stared sharply at the magnificent hotel building now visible at the end of the road. The hotel tower soared high, adorned with glittering crystal lights. They were in there now. My husband, my mother-in-law, my sister-in-law, and probably his mistress. They would be laughing, enjoying expensive food, and showing off their illusory wealth to the world. And as usual, they would be waiting for me to be the target of their scorn. I took a deep breath. No more tears, no more tightness in my chest. What flowed in my veins now was only a burning adrenaline transforming every cell of my sorrow into a lethal force. Tonight, I would uproot their lies completely. I would tear down the castle of sand they had built on my pain. I picked up the phone from the center console and quickly dialed Maria's number. The call connected before the first ring finished. Maria knew I was heading into a war zone, and she was fully prepared. Yes, Miss Hayes. I've been monitoring the movements from the central system. Everything is still under control. What are your next orders? Maria's voice was firm and professional, without a hint of hesitation. She was my loyal soldier who knew exactly how deeply my husband had hurt me. Maria, listen carefully, I said, my voice so calm it surprised even myself. My husband's charade has reached its limit. I just found the suitcase in the trunk of my car. He stole my late mother's heirlooms, forged my signature to transfer my assets to Chloe's name, and had plane tickets to Switzerland with that woman for tonight at 11. I heard a sharp intake of breath over the phone. Maria let out a grunt of fury. That bastard. He was going to make you the scapegoat for the loan sharks and the company's collapse while he lived in luxury overseas. Should I block the airline tickets and contact immigration right now? No, I replied quickly, a cynical smile touching my lips. Let the tickets be. I want him to think his plan is going smoothly until the very last second. If we block them now, he'll get a notification and might look for another escape route. Let him dream of the Swiss Alps. But Maria, I want you to execute our main plan right now. We don't need to wait until tomorrow. Yes, Miss Hayes. I'm ready. First directive, contact the bank managers who handle all of my husband's accounts. Personal accounts, the shell company accounts, freeze every single one of them right now. Revoke all his credit card privileges. Issue the directive directly in my name, as the majority shareholder and true CEO. If anyone asks, tell them an internal investigation is underway for massive fraud. I don't want him to be able to withdraw enough money to buy a bottle of water. Understood, Miss Hayes. Account freeze will be completed in 5 minutes. Next, you have all the audit documents we collected last month and the proof of his debt to the loan shark. Right, I checked, making sure my main weapon was ready. All in my hands, Miss Hayes. Notarized physical documents, the casino footage, shell company, transfer records, and of course the demand letter from the mob with tomorrow as the repayment deadline. The company's legal team is also on standby in the hotel's lower lobby awaiting my signal. Good. Bring all of it to the wedding hall right now. Don't come in until I give the signal. Wait in the hallway near the main ballroom entrance. Oh, and Maria, make sure you bring the original articles of incorporation and my majority shareholder certificate. It's time the world knew who the real boss of this family is. Understood, Miss Hayes. Our internal security team has already secured the office servers. Chloe or any of Ethan's cronies won't be able to erase any digital traces tonight. And the police. Contact our connections at the NYPD. Request a team be sent to this hotel with an arrest warrant for large-scale corporate embezzlement and document forgery. Let them know the primary suspect is planning to flee the country tonight, so they need to move fast. I want my husband to be led out of this building in handcuffs in front of all his esteemed guests. Brilliant, Miss Hayes. Executing immediately. What about you? Are you really going in there alone? They'll attack you verbally as always. Maria's voice softened slightly, a hint of a friend's concern showing through. I looked at my reflection in the rearview mirror. My eyes were slightly red from the brief tears earlier, but my gaze was as sharp as a freshly honed blade. I had on minimal makeup, my hair was tied back simply, and I was wearing a very plain pastel-colored dress. The dress my husband had bought me yesterday so I wouldn't stand out and overshadow Jessica's beauty. I looked exactly like a pitiful, spineless, submissive wife. Perfect. Don't worry about me, Maria. In fact, I want them to see me as the weak, foolish wife one last time. The higher they fly in their arrogance tonight, the more their bones will shatter when I bring them crashing down to earth. Get everything ready. I'll see you there in 15 minutes. Yes, Miss Hayes. Please be careful. I ended the call. My hand moved to the black suitcase beside me. I unzipped it again, took out a small jewelry box from my handbag, and placed the loan shark's demand letter, addressed to my husband, inside it. I tied the box with a beautiful red ribbon, as if it were a heartfelt wedding gift. This was a special present for my dear sister-in-law, a gift that would end her fake happiness in a matter of seconds. I parked my car in the hotel's VIP section. I took the suitcase filled with my husband's betrayal, gripping the handle tightly. The night air was cool on my skin. From the direction of the hotel lobby, I could faintly hear the sound of elegant classical music. I walked across the parking lot filled with the luxury sedans of my husband's business partners. My footsteps on the pavement were firm and steady. No more was the Evelyn who bowed her head in fear of her mother-in-law's scolding. No more was the Evelyn who felt guilty for not being the perfect wife. Tonight, the person entering this building was the true Queen Evelyn Hayes, here to reclaim her kingdom and punish the traitors. I entered the Grand Hotel lobby. A giant crystal chandelier showered the gleaming marble floor with golden light. The scent of lilies and white roses, Jessica's favorites, a floral arrangement that cost hundreds of thousands of dollars filled the air. A few late-arriving guests hurried towards the elevators, glancing at my shabby attire and the worn black suitcase I was pulling, their eyes filled with contempt. I responded to their stares with a faint, enigmatic smile. Go ahead, look down on me. Soon all of you will be on your knees begging for forgiveness. I stepped into the elevator that would take me to the main ballroom on the 8th floor. The digital numbers above the elevator door climbed in time with my heartbeat. My heart was pumping courage through my entire body. When the elevator doors opened, a long corridor with a thick red carpet appeared. At the end of the corridor, the massive carved wooden doors of the ballroom were firmly closed. From inside, I could hear a roar of applause and the voice of the MC booming over the sound system praising my husband's name. And of course, an event this magnificent would not have been possible without the incredible generosity of the bride's brother, the visionary leader of his company, the one and only Mr. Ethan Reed. The MC's voice echoed through the thick wooden doors. I smiled. A wide smile, so wide it made my cheeks feel stiff. It was a delicious irony. I approached the doors. In a dimly lit corner of the hallway, I saw Maria and two men in sharp suits, my top corporate lawyers, standing ready. Maria saw me and gave me a meaningful nod. Everything was in place. The bullets were loaded. The evidence was in hand. The army had surrounded the fortress. I smoothed the wrinkles on my dress, gripping the suitcase handle in my left hand, and the gift box with the loan shark's letter in my right. I took a deep breath and stared straight at the massive wooden doors in front of me. It was showtime. Two staff members in crisp uniforms opened the towering, intricately carved wooden doors for me. As the doors parted, a blast of cold air from the powerful air conditioning washed over my face. The scent of expensive perfumes and gourmet cuisine filled the air. The scene inside the ballroom was truly breathtaking. A thick carpet with classic floral patterns covered the entire floor, and 3 enormous crystal chandeliers on the ceiling cast a brilliant golden glow. Hundreds of round tables adorned with white silk tablecloths and vases of imported roses were already filled with guests dressed in their finest attire. The clinking of wine glasses and the melody of a live orchestra playing in the corner created an atmosphere of extreme high society. On the main stage at the far end of the room, decorated with white columns and thousands of fresh flowers to resemble a European palace, sat Jessica. My sister-in-law was wearing a floor-length wedding dress studded with Swarovski crystals, smiling brightly like a princess. Of course, who had paid for that fake smile and that multi-$100,000 dress? Her brother, with money stolen from my company. I walked slowly into the room. My low heels made almost no sound on the thick carpet. My knee-length pastel dress, which Ethan had bought for me at a department store to make me look plain, seemed utterly out of place and shabby amidst the sea of designer gowns and luxury suits. The black suitcase containing the evidence of my husband's betrayal was still in my left hand, and the small gift box with the red ribbon was clutched tightly in my right. I hadn't taken 10 steps down the central aisle when a sharp, blade-like glare pierced me from the VIP table directly below the stage. My mother-in-law, Sharon Reed, was on her feet, her face flushed red. She was wearing a gaudy, dark red velvet gown, her neck and wrists laden with chunky gold jewelry. Her eyes were bulging as she stared at me, her gaze raking over me from head to toe with undisguised disgust. With hurried steps and a face contorted with rage, Sharon marched towards me. She didn't care that the surrounding VIP guests were turning their heads to watch us. For her, belittling me in public was a source of pride, a way to show off her status as the powerful matriarch. "Where have you been? You lazy piece of trash!" Sharon hissed, her voice loud enough to make several nearby tables fall silent. Her hand covered in gold rings grabbed my arm roughly. "Do you have any idea what time it is? The ceremony is halfway over, and you show up now, looking like that. Are you deliberately trying to embarrass my son in front of his business partners?" I looked calmly into my mother-in-law's eyes. There was no longer any fear, no desire to bow my head and apologize as I had for the past 5 years. I just let her continue to spew her venom. And look at you, that cheap dress, your hair is a mess. Ethan is a respected CEO and he has to be embarrassed by a wife like you who can't even take care of herself. And what is that? She sneered, pointing at my suitcase. A beat-up old suitcase. Do you think this is a bus station? She deliberately raised her voice, making sure everyone around could hear how pathetic I was. Just then, Ethan came down from the stage. He approached me with a confident stride and a puffed-out chest. Dressed in a custom-made black tuxedo from a famous designer, he looked incredibly dignified and handsome. He smiled graciously at a few clients as he passed wearing the perfect mask of a successful man. But as soon as he reached me, the smile vanished, replaced by a cold, menacing glare. "Mother, that's enough. Don't make a scene here. There are people watching," Ethan said in a feigned, gentle voice, trying to appear like a dutiful son and a patient husband in front of the guests. Then he turned to me. His voice dropped to a sharp whisper only I could hear. "You are really getting on my last nerve, Evelyn. I told you not to cause any trouble. Go in through the back, find a table in the corner where no one can see you, and check that piece of garbage in the coat room. You're ruining the atmosphere." On the stage, Jessica, noticing the small commotion, also came down. She lifted her heavy dress with an annoyed expression. "Ethan, why is she here now? I told you if she couldn't match the elegant theme of my party, it would be better not to invite her. She's just going to ruin the family photos." Jessica pouted, looking at me with contempt. In the past, a situation like this would have made my chest tight with anxiety. It would have made me bow my head, hold back tears, and apologize repeatedly until they were satisfied. But tonight I smiled. A genuine faint smile that came from deep within my heart. Because I knew just how fragile their arrogance was. I looked at each of them in turn, my haughty mother-in-law, my arrogant sister-in-law, and my husband, who believed he was the most powerful man in the world. "I'm sorry I'm late, Sharon." "Jessica," I said, my voice calm but clear, making sure my words were audible to all three of them. "I had to stop and pick up a very special wedding gift. Something that will completely change the life of this family." Ethan snorted with contempt. "What kind of gift could a woman with no income like you possibly afford? Probably some cheap trinket from a flea market. Just shut up and get out of the way." I didn't budge. I held up the small box with the red ribbon in my right hand and offered it to Jessica. "This is for you, Jessica. A gift from me and your beloved brother. Open it now. I'm sure it's far more valuable than any diamond necklace you're wearing tonight." Jessica frowned, looking at the box suspiciously. But curiosity won over her pride. She snatched the box from my hand. "If this is some piece of junk, I'm throwing it straight in the trash," she threatened, pulling at the red ribbon. While Jessica was opening the gift box, I took a small step closer to Ethan. The distance between us was now only a few inches. I could smell the expensive cologne he was wearing, the same one his mistress Chloe used. I looked straight into his arrogant eyes, making sure he saw the emptiness and coldness in mine. "Ethan," I whispered in his ear. My voice was low and menacing like a snake about to strike its prey. "On my way here tonight, I don't know why, but I suddenly got very curious about what was in the trunk of your car." I could feel Ethan's breath catch for a moment. His jaw muscles tensed, but he tried to maintain a stoic expression. "Don't talk nonsense." "Did you go through my car?" he snapped, his voice filled with rage. I widened my smile and leaned closer. "I opened that black suitcase, honey. Mother's heirlooms look so beautiful under the streetlights. And you know what? The name Chloe Cole looks quite good on my property deeds. Oh, and don't worry. Your business class ticket to Switzerland for tonight is still safe. At least it was 5 minutes ago." In that instant, I witnessed the most satisfying sight of my life. My husband's handsome, arrogant face turned deathly pale, as if all the blood had drained from his body. His eyes, which had been filled with menace just moments ago, were now wide with pure, unadulterated terror and panic. A cold sweat immediately broke out on his temples. His mouth hung slightly open as if to speak, but no sound came out. His once confident posture seemed to shrink and crumble. He realized that his darkest secret, his entire escape plan, was completely exposed in my hands. The psychological weapon I had fired had struck him right in his defensive heart. "Evelyn, what are you talking about? You—" Ethan's voice was trembling so violently it was barely audible. He tried to grab my arm, but his hand was shaking too much. At the same time, a stifled scream came from Jessica's direction. My sister-in-law had managed to open the small box. Her face, which had been glowing with happiness moments before, was now filled with confusion and fear. Her hand trembled as she held up the thick piece of paper with a red stamp that she had just taken out of the box. "Ethan, what is this?" Jessica asked in a shaky voice, holding up the paper. Tears began to well up in her eyes, ruining her expensive makeup. "What does this mean?" $5 million. Mob loan shark. Ethan, why is there a family asset seizure warning in my wedding gift? My mother-in-law, who had been bewildered by the drastic change in her son's face, snatched the paper from Jessica's hand. She read the numbers and the name of the loan shark on it. Instantly, her legs gave way. She staggered backward and would have crashed into the VIP table behind her if another guest hadn't caught her. "Ethan, what is this debt? You're a successful CEO. Why would you borrow millions from a loan shark? This is fake, isn't it?" "This crazy bitch made it all up," Sharon shrieked hysterically, pointing a trembling, bejeweled finger at my face. The commotion at the VIP table finally caught the attention of every guest in the ballroom. The orchestra's music slowly faded as they noticed the chaotic scene. The atmosphere suddenly became quiet, replaced by the murmurs of hundreds of pairs of eyes now staring intently at us. Hearing the words debt and asset seizure, Ethan's business clients began to rise from their seats, whispering to each other with tense faces. I stood tall in the middle of the chaos I had just created. There was no turmoil within me. I looked at Ethan, who now looked like a condemned prisoner awaiting his execution. His breathing was ragged and his eyes darted left and right as if searching for an escape route. This psychological attack had successfully shattered his psyche, and in a matter of seconds, brought the wall of his family's arrogance crumbling down. But this was only the beginning. The real storm was just about to sweep away their fake kingdom. Seeing his mother's hysteria and his sister's sobbing over the loan shark's demand letter, Ethan's panic finally erupted into savage aggression. The illusion of success he had built for years was collapsing before the eyes of his business associates and relatives. His survival instincts overwhelmed his reason. His pale face was now flushed crimson with rage and desperation. "Everybody shut up!" Ethan roared at his mother and sister. Sharon was stunned, as her son had never yelled at her in public in his entire life. Ethan then turned to me, his eyes filled with murderous intent. The veins on his neck bulged. He took a step forward and raised his right hand, palm open, ready to strike me with a vicious slap in front of hundreds of watching eyes. "This is all you're doing, isn't it, you crazy gold-digging whore? You forged this letter to ruin my family, didn't you? You're just jealous of my success," he screamed like a madman, no longer caring about the gentlemanly image he had always maintained. He tried to snatch the black suitcase from my hand. "Give me that suitcase, security, call security. Get this crazy woman out of my party." I didn't flinch. I looked into his bloodshot eyes with an ice-cold gaze, ready to take the slap if he was foolish enough to go through with it. But before Ethan's hand could touch my skin, a firm hand in a black suit caught his wrist in midair with immense force. Ethan yelped in surprise and turned to his side. A burly man, one of my lawyers, slowly twisted my husband's wrist, forcing him to lower his hand in a pained groan. "Mr. Reed, you will take your filthy hands off, Miss Hayes. Now." A woman's voice, firm, sharp, and authoritative, cut through the silence of the ballroom. My personal assistant, Maria Flores, was striding forward from the main entrance. She was not alone. Behind her, 3 corporate lawyers carrying thick briefcases walked in formation. Their steps were confident, exuding an aura of authority that made the VIP guests who were about to intervene shrink back. Ethan's eyes widened in recognition. "Maria, what are you doing here? You work for my company. How dare you hire thugs to attack your CEO at his own event? You're fired effective immediately." Ethan threatened, struggling unsuccessfully to break free from the lawyers. "Grip." Maria stopped right beside me. She looked Ethan up and down as if he were a pest and smirked. "You have no authority to fire me, Mr. Reed, because you are not the owner of this company. You are merely a puppet we placed in the CEO's chair for a little while, and your term ends tonight." Maria's statement sent a ripple of murmurs through the ballroom. The guests' whispers grew louder. Sharon, who was being supported by another guest, tried to shout, "What is this woman talking about, Ethan? Who is she? Get them all out of here." Ignoring Sharon's cries, Maria raised a hand and signaled to the operator's control room on the upper level of the ballroom. A few seconds later, the main lights of the ballroom dimmed in unison. The orchestra music, which had stopped, was now replaced by the whirring sound of a giant projector screen descending from the ceiling. The massive white screen behind the stage, which had previously been showing a romantic slideshow of Jessica and her husband, suddenly flickered to black. The screen had been completely hacked by Maria's IT team. When the screen lit up again, it wasn't Jessica's happy face, but a high-resolution document projected for all to see. The first document was the shareholder registry of the company Ethan worked for. There, in bold capital letters, it clearly stated, Majority shareholder Evelyn Hayes, 85% ownership. Ethan's name, on the other hand, was nowhere on the list of owners. He was merely listed as a contract employee at the director level. Lies, Evelyn is just an unemployed housewife. That document is fake. Jessica screamed from the stage, her face a mess of smeared tears. Maria didn't respond. She pressed a button on the remote in her hand, and the image on the screen changed rapidly. An onslaught of irrefutable facts began to pour forth. The screen now displayed a series of crystal-clear photographs. A picture of the open black suitcase in the trunk of my car. The diamond jewelry of my mother's heirlooms clearly visible inside. The forged asset certificates in Chloe Cole's name, and the 2 business-class tickets to Switzerland under Ethan and Chloe's names. Gasps of shock erupted from the guests. Several of Ethan's business associates shook their heads, beginning to realize the magnitude of the scandal unfolding. Sharon stared at the screen with her mouth agape, then slowly began to search the crowd for Chloe's face. As it happened, Chloe was at the party. The young woman, now deathly pale, tried to slowly back away towards the exit, but 2 hotel security guards hired by Maria blocked her path at the door. Click. The image on the screen changed again. This time it wasn't a photo but a silent video. Hidden camera footage. On the giant screen, everyone in the room could see Ethan's face clear as day, gambling excitedly at an illegal casino table, hugging a prostitute laughing loudly, with a pile of chips, worth millions of dollars, scattered in front of him. The screen also displayed the bank transfer records from the shell companies, proving that tens of millions of dollars of company funds had been embezzled to pay off his gambling debts, and the final transaction record showed a payment of millions to the vendors of this very hotel. My sister-in-law's lavish wedding was unequivocally funded by the proceeds of a white-collar crime. Jessica's husband. The son of a prominent family turned beet red with shame. Jessica's father-in-law threw his wineglass to the floor, cursed at Ethan, and then dragged his son's hand immediately, leaving the venue annulling the marriage in front of everyone. Jessica screamed hysterically and collapsed to the floor of the stage, clutching the hem of her wedding dress, which was now just a wrapper for a lie. I stepped forward and took the microphone from the bewildered MC's table. As I tapped the mic, a loud feedback sound silenced all the guests. Their attention was now focused on me, the true matriarch. Good evening, everyone. I am deeply sorry to interrupt what seems to be such a magnificent event. My voice echoed throughout the vast ballroom, calm, authoritative, and sharp. It was no longer the hesitant voice of a submissive wife. I turned to my husband, who had collapsed into a nearby chair. His face was slick with cold sweat. His empty eyes stared at the screen that continued to display the evidence of his crimes. He was, for all intents and purposes, completely broken. There was no room for denial, no place to hide. For those of you who don't know me, allow me to introduce myself. My name is Evelyn Hayes. For the past 5 years, I have been the actual owner and the sole controlling shareholder of the company. That man over there has been claiming to be the result of his own blood, sweat, and tears. I pointed a contemptuous finger directly at Ethan's face. This man, whom you all know as a generous CEO, is in reality nothing more than a parasite addicted to gambling. He has embezzled tens of millions of dollars from my family's company to gamble, stolen my late mother's heirlooms, forged my signature to steal my assets, had an affair with his assistant, and was planning to flee the country. Tonight, leaving his own family here to face the ruthless loan, sharks demanding his life as payment. I then turned my gaze to my mother-in-law, who was now leaning against a table leg, sobbing and beating her chest. And to my very esteemed mother-in-law, Mrs. Sharon Reed. You always told me I was a poor parasite leeching off your son's success. You humiliated me every single day. But the truth is, without my money, you and your precious children would never have been able to set foot in this 5-star hotel. You wouldn't even have a roof over your heads. I walked slowly towards Ethan, who was now slumped over with his head in his hands. The lawyer who had been holding him had let go, as he no longer had any strength to resist. His arrogance was completely stripped bare in public. Tonight, Ethan, I said coldly, my voice resonating through the room. Tonight I take back everything. There will be no escape to Switzerland for you. There is nowhere left for you to hide. I signaled to Maria. She nodded, took out her phone, and pressed a single button. From outside the firmly closed ballroom doors, the sound of police sirens, faint at first, began to cut through the night's silence, slowly getting closer to the hotel lobby. The time for judgment had arrived. The faint wail of sirens from afar grew into a deafening roar, signaling the arrival of multiple police cruisers at the hotel's main entrance. The atmosphere in the ballroom, already thick with tension, now shifted to one of subdued horror. The guests, mostly elite executives, high-ranking officials and business associates who had once worshipped Ethan, began to back away, clearing a wide path in the center of the room. No one stepped forward to defend the man now sitting in a chair, his expensive suit soaked with cold sweat trembling. The massive carved wooden doors were pushed open forcefully. 5 police officers in perfect uniform entered with determined faces, led by a captain who immediately scanned the room. The sound of their boots on the thick carpet echoed like the ticking of a death clock for my husband's arrogance. Maria, standing beside me, nodded to the captain. The captain, ignoring the hundreds of watching eyes, walked straight towards us. "Good evening," the captain's deep voice boomed through the microphone I was still holding. "We are from the NYPD Major Case Squad. We are here to execute arrest warrants for Mr. Ethan Reed and Miss Chloe Cole." Upon hearing her name called by the police, Chloe, who had been held by hotel security near the exit, began to scream hysterically. She struggled to break free from the guard's grasp, crying like a madwoman, her makeup a complete wreck. "Let me go! I don't know anything! Ethan made me do it all. It was his plan to run away to Switzerland. Please, I was just following orders," Chloe shrieked, shamelessly, pointing a finger at Ethan. She had betrayed him just as quickly as he had betrayed me. Ethan didn't react to Chloe's outburst. His body went limp, as if he had lost every bone. He slid off the chair and fell to his knees on the carpeted floor, right at the tip of my shoes. The arrogant man who had despised me for 5 years, the man who claimed to be the king who fed me, was now prostrated before me like a beggar pleading for mercy. "Evelyn. Evelyn, please," Ethan's voice was a choked, pathetic sob. He tried to grab my ankles, but I quickly stepped back, looking at him with utter disgust. "I'm sorry, Evelyn. I was wrong. I was tricked by those gamblers. Please drop the charges. I'm your husband, Evelyn. Don't you remember our wedding vows? Please don't let me go to prison." I looked at him coldly. There wasn't a shred of pity left in my heart. "My tears were as fake as your love," I said, in a flat, cutting tone. "Our wedding vows. You broke them the first time you lied to me, the first time you let your mother humiliate me, and the first time you touched another woman while spending my money. You weren't tricked by anyone. You trapped yourself with your own greed." I turned my gaze to the company's board members and investors who were present that night. They were all looking at me with a mixture of shock and respect. I raised the microphone again and spoke loudly. "To all the board members and business partners present here, as the majority shareholder and the true owner of the company, I, Evelyn Hayes, hereby declare before all of you tonight that Mr. Ethan Reed is dishonorably dismissed from his position as CEO. All losses he has caused will be legally pursued to the fullest extent. Starting tomorrow morning, I will be taking direct control of all management of my family's legacy." The declaration was met with a stunned silence, followed by nods of agreement from several key investors. Ethan wailed even louder, mourning his career and his life, which had vanished in an instant. In another corner, the judgment was not yet over. The family of Jessica's now ex-husband, who had been standing like stone near the stage, finally took action. The patriarch, a shipping magnate who valued family honor above all else, approached Jessica and Sharon, his face red with fury. "This event is over," the middle-aged man boomed. He pointed at Jessica, who was still crying on the floor. "We are annulling this marriage. We cannot be associated with a family of swindlers, thieves, and gambling addicts. You have shamed our family in front of all our peers. You will have to compensate us for all the intangible damages this humiliation has caused." Jessica screamed and grabbed her former father-in-law's leg. "Father, please, don't cancel the wedding. I really love your son. I didn't know anything about this stolen money. Please don't abandon me." But the man's family was unmoved. Jessica's fiancé took off the engagement ring and threw it roughly on the floor in front of her before leaving the ballroom with his family. Jessica shrieked hysterically, tearing at her wedding dress in utter despair. Her dream wedding had turned into a funeral for her future. Seeing both her children shattered at once, my mother-in-law Sharon, usually so arrogant and foul-mouthed, suddenly crawled towards me. Her old face was wet with tears, her fancy gown a mess. She tried to grab my hand, bowing her body so low it almost touched the floor. "Evelyn, my dear daughter-in-law, I was wrong. I was a fool to believe Ethan's lies. Please forgive Ethan. He's your husband. And please pay off that loan shark debt. I'm scared, Evelyn. Those loan sharks will kill us. Please, Evelyn, you have so much money. A few million is nothing to you. Please save our family. Sharon pleaded, her voice a pathetic whine. I yanked my hand away from her grasp. I looked straight into the eyes of the woman who had mentally tortured me for years. I am no longer your daughter-in-law, my voice rang out, sharp and clear. And while I may have a lot of money, I will not spend a single penny to save greedy people like you. Oh, and one more thing, Mrs. Reed. That luxurious house you've been living in, the one you always bragged about to your friends, that's my house. The deed is in my name, bought long before I ever knew your son. Sharon's eyes went wide, her lips trembling violently. That can't be. Oh, it can, I replied coldly. So I'm giving you until 9 a.m. tomorrow. Vacate my house. You can take your cheap clothes, but don't touch any of the furniture or valuables. They were all bought with my money. If you are still there tomorrow morning, I will have security drag you out onto the street. Sharon let out a choked scream, covered her face with her hands, and finally collapsed onto the ballroom carpet in a dead faint. Not a single guest moved to help her. They all just watched the downfall of the arrogant family with looks of disgust. The captain signaled to his officers. 2 policemen immediately forced Ethan to his feet and handcuffed his hands behind his back. My husband, who had once valued his pride and appearance so much, was now led out of the lavish building with his head bowed, sobbing, past the hundreds of guests who were now sneering at him. At the exit, Chloe was also handcuffed and led away, useless tears of regret trailing behind her. I stood tall in the middle of the room, watching them go with a heart full of relief. The heavy burden that had been crushing my shoulders for 5 years was finally lifted. The black suitcase with my mother's heirlooms was safely secured by Maria. I closed my eyes for a moment and breathed in the air of freedom. The stage play was over. No more tears, no more fear. From this moment on, I reclaim my crown. 1 year has passed since that night of judgment in the hotel ballroom. The warm morning sun streamed through the massive glass walls of my office, located on the 40th floor of a downtown skyscraper. I stood by the window, sipping my favorite chamomile tea, looking down at the cityscape that looked like a miniature world from this height. I was wearing an elegant navy blue power suit, with high heels that gave me a confident stride. My shoulder-length hair was neatly styled, framing a face that now exuded an aura of calm and determination. I was no longer the parasitic wife Evelyn Hayes who always bowed her head in fear. I was now CEO and sole owner of the even larger Hayes Industries. The divorce proceedings with Ethan had been swift and smooth, thanks to the mountain of evidence of his crimes, infidelity, and embezzlement submitted by my legal team. The family court granted the divorce in the first hearing. All the assets that had been forged in Chloe's name were successfully recovered and returned to the company and my personal accounts. There was a quiet knock on my office door. Maria entered with a bright smile, a tablet in her hand. She was no longer my secret personal assistant, but the vice president, a position I had appointed her to for her outstanding dedication and intelligence. Good morning, Miss Hayes, Maria said cheerfully. This quarter's financial report is out. After the major restructuring and removing all the leeches from the old management, our net profit has increased by 20% compared to last year. I smiled back at Maria and walked over to my large desk. Excellent work, Maria. I never doubted your abilities. Maria placed the tablet on my desk and paused for a moment. Her expression turned slightly more serious, a hint of hesitation in her eyes. Miss Hayes, there's one more thing. I received a regular update this morning from our internal audit chief regarding the past. I paused, my hand hovering over a document. I knew exactly what she meant by the past. Even though I no longer cared, Maria never forgot to give me an annual report on the fate of those who had tormented me just to ensure they were no longer a threat. It's all right, Maria. Just tell me. I don't mind hearing it, I said calmly, leaning back in my plush leather chair. Ethan Reed was transferred to a maximum security prison last week, Maria reported. His sentence was increased to 15 years without parole after charges of organized money laundering were proven. His condition is said to be quite miserable, Miss Hayes. He's very thin, frequently ill, and often bullied by his cellmates. No one from his family or his old business associates has visited him since he was incarcerated. I nodded silently. No joy, no pity. It was the logical consequence of a greed that had blinded him, and the woman Chloe Cole was sentenced to 4 years for her involvement in document forgery. She was recently moved to solitary confinement after being caught trying to seduce a guard to get better privileges. I hear her family back home has also disowned her out of extreme shame. I took a slow sip of my tea. Karma indeed worked in meticulous ways. And my former mother-in-law and her lovely daughter, I asked with a hint of sarcasm, remembering how arrogant they were a year ago. Maria let out a long sigh before answering. They are the ones suffering the most on the outside, Miss Hayes. After you evicted them from the house, they had nowhere to live. The multi-million-dollar debt Ethan left with the mob loan sharks was not forgiven. When Ethan went to prison, the debt was transferred to his family. Sharon and Jessica were forced to live in a shabby, one-room apartment in a flood-prone area on the outskirts of the city. Maria swiped the tablet screen to show me a photo taken from a distance by our private investigator. In the photo, a very old, haggard-looking woman in worn-out clothes was washing a pile of dirty dishes in front of a street food stall. Her hands were wrinkled and her face was dark and weathered from the sun. It was Sharon, the woman who once dripped with gold and despised me for hand-washing clothes. Sharon works as a dishwasher from dawn till dusk just to make ends meet, Maria continued. And Jessica works as a cleaner in a plastics factory. They never have a moment of peace, Miss Hayes. The loan sharks' enforcers visit their small room at the end of every month to take what little salary they earn and threaten their safety. They were reaping what they had sown for years. I stared at the photo for a long time before closing the tablet screen with a single touch. My heart was not moved in the slightest by their suffering. I had once given them a palace, and they had chosen to spit in my face. Now they were living in the mud pit they had dug for themselves. Justice had been served in the most perfect way. The universe never sleeps when it comes to recording human misdeeds. That's enough, Maria. Close the book on them. From today on, I don't need to hear any more reports about those people. They are already dead in my past, I said firmly, dusting off the past from my mind. Understood, Miss Hayes. The reports will be terminated permanently, Maria replied with a relieved smile. Oh, and you have a meeting with the Japanese investors at 10. The car and driver are ready in the lobby. I stood up, picked up my briefcase, and walked out of the office alongside Maria. All right, let's get to work and make this company even greater. As we headed towards the elevator, I thought back to that rainy night. The night I drove alone, crying behind the wheel of a car that changed the entire course of my life. The wound was once very deep, but it was that very wound that awakened me from a long slumber full of foolishness. I am grateful for that painful betrayal, for without it, I would never have found my true strength. I smiled at my reflection in the gleaming steel elevator doors. I am Evelyn Hayes. I am free at peace and in complete control of my destiny. The story of the pitiful parasitic wife has ended, replaced by the story of a queen who stands proudly on her own throne.